Good morning. I guess it's afternoon. I put on a little hold music for y'all and then I got into it. I'm like, I don't understand what they're saying. So it was not in English, but hey, it said, in case y'all want to know, it was the title of the playlist was Chill Music for Zoom Meetings, Rainy Days and Rides. And we have rainy days Zoom meetings going on. And then I know Brooke's going to take us for a ride. So I felt like it was, something we needed to do. Okay. So I want to make sure we are recording. We are. And today is Monday, and I don't know where you are, but it's kind of rainy and a little cool here in Dallas. Does anyone have cold weather where they are? Becky, maybe? Rhonda? Yeah. What do you got, Jessica? What is temp wise? 70s. Girl, that ain't cold. Snowing. People have snowing. Oh, I'm jealous. We're only Texas people are only just a little jealous, though. We're not really that jealous. But and we got Brooke on. I think a couple more people are hopping on. So without further ado, I want to jump into who we have as our guest today. We have the fabulous Brooke Kanitz. And if you know Brooke Kanitz, you know she is a baller. She is encouraging. She's inspiring. She can give you a good kick in the pants when you need it. And she is a woman of her word. If she says she's going to be somewhere, or she says she's going to go do something with her business or her family, 100% she's going to do it. She's not one of those people that you're like, man, I wonder if Brooke's going to show up. She says she's going to do something. She is going to do it. And Brooke has been, I want to give you a little background on Brooke because I told her, I'm like, give me all the deets. She is a wife and mom. She's been married for 21 years to Dustin. And I think y'all were high school sweethearts, right?
Yeah, we met when we were 16.
Okay, there you
Yep.
go. Ooh, I have a 16-year-old. That kind of makes me
I
nervous.
have a 17-year-old. It's freaking weird.
Yeah. So she has four boys, y'all. Four. Creighton is 17. Kaiser is 15, Cash is 10, and Kager is 8. So the woman is busy. She became a nurse in 2002 and then went back to school to get her master's after having two kids. I can't even imagine, girl. She's been a family nurse practitioner since 2010, but hasn't had to work in the clinic since 2017 because of her Plexus business and the income she has made from that. She also has a podcast called Perfectly You, which she started during the chaos of 2020, which, if y'all know, there was a lot of entrepreneurs that kind of like went a different direction or joined Plexus or started doing something different because 2020 was so crazy. And she is not just a podcast, y'all. She's about to release her 116th episode, I think today or tomorrow. Is that right? Today?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yep.
And I'm going to let her kind of tell a little bit about that. But then also, she has a coaching community and upcoming masterclass called Growing in Godfidence. And I love Brooke because she is a woman of faith. She lets the Lord guide her steps in everything that she does. But Brooke, I want to ask you because before we get into the topic, so 2020 was crazy for a lot of us. What made you think, or what led up to you thinking, I feel led to do a podcast?
It's kind of funny because I wanted to share, and I wanted to share what I had learned, and I didn't know how to do that. And I was like, well, I mean, do you just start talking on social media? Well, I'm already doing that. Like, how can I reach other people? And I don't know. My pastor says this all the time, but he's like, I don't want to be like weird and say I'm hyper spiritual. It's not like I heard something audibly from the sky, but I heard like, this is what you're supposed to do. I didn't actually want to start a podcast. Like, it was totally an act of obedience to sit down and record. Like, literally, I was scared to death, 100% terrified to put myself out there. And what's really neat about being part of Plexus is I felt like I had really bared it all. I felt like I had showed up. I felt like I had showed up authentically. That word is so overused, right? We use it all the time when we're not being authentic. I felt like I had showed up authentically. And, but I was like, but if I share, like, they're really going to know me. Like, they're really going to know me. And I felt like God was saying, this is what you're supposed to do. And so I really had a commitment to myself and Dustin and the Lord, the only people that knew what I was doing. And I said, if I do this, if I sit down to record, I'm going to record whatever he asked me to. And I'm not going to be filtered. I'm not going to be censored. I'm not going to go back and edit and erase what I said because, oh my gosh, someone might judge me. Like, it's going to be candid and it's going to be the truth and nothing is off limits. And he was like, okay. I think I thought it was going to scare him. And Dustin's like, all right. He's always been. I mean, that was the beginning of our business. All right. And so it really was an act of obedience to sit down because I don't plan ahead. I don't like have a layout of what I'm going to talk about. I have one idea and I sit down and I record, and whatever that is, and I don't know if it's for one person. And I don't care if it's for one person. Like, if it's for one person, they're the person who's supposed to hear that message. So it's really been an act of obedience. The crazy thing is that then that trickled back to my Plexus business because I was like, wait a minute, I'm not being obedient here. I'm not sharing with the person that is on my heart. Like, God, I just had a nudge from the Holy Spirit to reach out to this person. I was worried about being judged, so I didn't do that. So it was weird how I went out and I could step out there, and then it had a ripple effect back into my business, and it showed me where I was not being obedient. So it was totally an act of obedience. I'm still showing up because I said if I did it, I wouldn't miss a week. And here we are in episode 100 and I don't know what, 13 maybe. And yeah, it's exciting. So it is absolutely like it's his words, and I try to do the best that I can to get out of the way, literally.
That's awesome, because I think in our Plexus business, the number one thing we all struggle with is, do I want to be authentic and just reach out to that person and not worry about being judged or what they say or what they think? How am I going to look? And we internalize it all. And I love the fact that you're like, I have no idea really what it is. I'm just going to be obedient to what the Lord is telling me. And I'm going to just share what's on my heart. Mm-hmm. And then how that kind of filters back into your Plexus business. I mean, that's fabulous, because I think we all are going, okay, how do we make this process easier about being more authentic on social media and being just real with people and say, hey, I wanted to reach out to you about Plexus because. So thank you for telling us a little bit about that. I know we all want to follow that. And I mean, y'all, I'm telling you, if you are wanting someone to get you pumped up to reach out to those people who you are scared to death to do, to reach out to, Brooke is your girl to encourage you and get you doing that. So Brooke, I'm going to pass it over to you, and I want you to just share what's on your heart. And guys, I see some of you are taking notes, but think of while she's talking, if you have a certain question or you want to know something, jot that down. And when she's done, we will kind of ask some questions. So Brooke, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Well, thanks for that intro, Ellen, because like I would tell you I would absolutely like hand that right back and say, if you want someone to light your fire and motivate you, Ellen Ford's your girl. Like, it was like, she's not talking about me. She's looking in the mirror right now, because like, that is really who she is. So I'm honored. But thank you guys. Thank you that I get to be here today. And I love sharing these things. And I tell you, when we talked about like podcasting and authenticity, I share all that because when I started this journey 7 years ago, probably people looked at my posts and thought I was being authentic. And I was being as authentic as I could be at the time, with what I knew how to be, with the mask that I was wearing, with the way that I wanted to fit in. I was still being what I thought was authentic. But you guys, this journey is so cool because the layers just keep falling off. And we're like, you just get to, not to a point like, there's the whole thing of like, I just don't care anymore. People get kind of aggressive and kind of cynical about it and have that snide. I'm not talking like that. I'm like, you really do just develop a confidence that you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, you know why you're reaching out to the people, and you're going to just go and do what God has called you to do. And each layer that has fallen off, I've been more confident to show up in who I really am. So it was funny. Like, I was thinking like a couple years ago, I'd be like, should I like wear a hoodie? Should I like prepare something? Should I do? I mean, like literally you think about these things. And I'm like, No, and you guys, I wrote down a few notes of the things that I wanted to talk about, and then I went and sat in prayer, and I opened up my Bible, and I'm going to share what I read, because it was like, oh, that's exactly what I was talking about this morning. So I want to talk a little bit for a minute, and I won't talk forever. You guys can. I'd rather have a conversation with you, and you guys ask me questions. So I'm going to share a few things, and then I'd love to talk with you guys through a few things if that's okay. But I want to share my favorite subject to coach on. Period. If you've listened to any podcast or you've seen me share on social media or any story, I love to talk about accountability. I absolutely love accountability. I'm going to tell you, and I'm a Christ follower, so if this offends you, I'm sorry, but that's okay. Just listen, because there's a lot of value in it for you too. So don't leave and don't be scared. And even if you don't believe what I believe, that's okay. You will learn something here today. But I believe that humans shy away from accountability because, like, that is like you have a choice to make while we're here on this planet. And it is ultimately accountability, where we're going after this life is over. So, like, we shy away from accountability. Humans shy away from accountability because we don't want to be personally responsible for our futures. We don't want to be personally responsible for our businesses. We don't want to be personally responsible for our health. We don't want to be personally responsible for our marriages, for how our kids turn out, for if our kids are respectful to other people. Like, I want you guys to marry, because I think sometimes we run away from the word accountability. I want you to marry the words for this conversation: accountability and personal responsibility. Like, what am I personally responsible for? Because I think sometimes accountability seems like a big word, right? It's like, oh, I want to hold them accountable. Don't we hear it like that? Like, hold them accountable. And we're going to talk about anything but that today. We're not talking about holding anyone else accountable. We're going to talk about personal responsibility, my accountability. You're going to talk about your accountability. We love to think about accountability, and accountability is, like, I'm going to hold you accountable for your word. I'm going to make sure that you do your job. And I'm being a little bit aggressive and bossy for a reason, but like, that's what we think about, and that's what the world talks about. That's not accountability. Like, everybody has their own accountability. So we're talking about personal responsibility. So if that word turns you off a little bit, just substitute personal responsibility. Okay. So I want to tell you a story. I love talking about my kids. Aggressive and bossy is the best way. Okay. Yeah, I know, Johnston. I know you got that. So I'll tell you a story about my kids, because I think sometimes we can learn so much better when it's not like, if I talked about this with your team right away, you'd lose your minds and you wouldn't be open to learning it. But if I tell you about my kids, you'll be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So Cash and Cager, my two littles, are 8 and 10. And last week, my two bigs didn't have school. So we have varsity squad and the JV squad. There's about a 5-year gap. So we have 2 and 2. And so the big boys were sleeping in, the little boys were going to go to school that day. And so I get up in the morning of what I've planned to feed them: protein pancakes with blueberries that I get up and I heat up in the toaster oven, right? Feeling pretty good about it. I get up in the morning and they're gone. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I know that Creighton Miles, my oldest, ate them the day before, and there's no food for breakfast. So I planned what I think is a really pretty great idea. It's cold. We have the fireplace on last week, which is funny because it's been like 90s like after that, but it's Kansas and fall and whatever. So I make a little picnic of like protein balls, blueberries, yogurt. They're sitting over by the fireplace, but I tell them they shouldn't bring their drinks over there. Cash is 10, brings his milk over to the fireplace. And what do you suppose happens? Because they're 10-year-old boys sitting on top of each other in their underwear, trying to crowd it, like as if one of them can get closer to the fire than the other, and then their butts will be warmer than the other. I mean, seriously, like, that's life with kids. And so guess what happens? His milk spills. Okay. So he says, Cager spilled my milk. And I'm like, okay. So how did your milk get spilled? We had this whole conversation. Well, I can tell you, in the moment, no one wants to be coached. That's not a learning moment. No one actually wants to hear about that. But I said, how did your milk get spilled? Cager spilled my milk. And I said, how could Cager have spilled your milk if you didn't bring it over there? Well, I was sitting there, and then I did whatever, and he turned and he elbowed it, and he has this whole elaborate description of why Cager spilled his milk and why Cager should clean up his milk, because Cager spilled his milk because it was by the fireplace. When I had explicitly said, here's your picnic by the fireplace, like trying to entice them. I'm out of the breakfast I wanted to make them. They don't want to be up. They know their brothers are sleeping in, and it's cold. Everyone would rather be back in bed, and we're trying to make it a good morning. And so he brings his milk over there anyway. So I asked him, I said, how could your milk have gotten spilled if it wasn't by the fireplace? Well, Cager spilled my milk. So you guys, this is a classic example of someone who is not taking personal responsibility. Okay. So I want you to think about what contributed to his milk being spilled. And you guys might be like, why did I get on the call for Brooke to talk about our kids spilling milk? I promise you it'll be relevant in a minute. Okay. But I want you to think about it. All the steps that went into it. Number one, it was Cash's milk. Number two, he brought it to the fireplace when he wasn't supposed to. Number three, it doesn't matter if a tornado came through and took it and tipped the milk over. It was still his milk and he still brought it where he wasn't supposed to have it. And someone's got to clean it up because it's now on my floor, right? So we started talking about it, and my child was not ready to accept personal responsibility. He was not really ready to accept his accountable story. Okay. So I want you to think about accountability has nothing to do with the other person. Accountability only has to do with you. So right now, I want you to write down in the chat, because this is a great place for us to all be like, and here's the deal. I don't care if your upline's on here and this is about them. I don't care if your sideline's on here and this is about them. I don't care if your downline is on here and this is about them. I want you to think about the last time that you blame someone for spilling your milk. Right? And I ain't talking about your milk. And it was probably this morning, maybe yesterday. I mean, like, we do this all the time. And if you don't have an example, then you're not really in touch with what's, because we blame. So here's what happens when we're not accountable. We blame. Right, Becky, thank you. Me too, right? Like, I heard someone, I was working in my coffee shop this morning, she's like, oh my gosh, this rain. And she was complaining about the rain. Okay, when you blame, when you complain, or when you point fingers at anything, even if it's the clouds in the sky, you are not in accountability. If you were looking in the past hour, okay, thank you. Literally, y'all, when is the last time you complained or blamed someone for spilling your milk? Okay, see, and I want you guys, the whole point of this is to be like, yeah, me too. Like, yeah, I do that too. And you guys, the whole time we're here on this planet as humans, we're going to wrestle with this because we want to be right. We want it to be your fault. I want to point fingers on you. Wes says never. Get off this call, Wes. Get out of here. So, and John Maxwell will say, like, these times when it happens and you don't like think that you need growth, you're either a liar or you're a sociopath. So you have two options. You either put some in the chat or you're a liar or you're a sociopath. John Maxwell said it, not me. You can't hate him. He's like an ex-pastor. He's like old. He's nice. Like, you can't hate him. You could hate me. You can't hate Johnny Max. So we do it all the time, you guys. We do it all the time. We blame people for spilling our milk. So we blame, when we complain, or when we point fingers at anything or everything, we are not walking in accountability. So I really want to talk about what is personal responsibility, what is accountability this morning. If we walk through that spilled milk scenario, which really did happen, which Cash really did reluctantly like go over and clean it up. And then, okay, now you got to get water on that because now you just rub milk into my floor. So now he's doing it again. And we're driving out to the school and I'm asking him these questions. We have a 6-mile drive. And by the time we got to the school, you guys, he was ready to accept personal responsibility. He's 10 years old. If my 10-year-old can do it in 20 minutes, you can do it in 20 minutes or at least 20 hours or a few days. You don't have to blame somebody for the next 6 months, right? Or you've been blaming somebody since you started Plexus, or you've been blaming, some of your parents since you were a kid. Like, there's somewhere you get to work on accountability today. And if you're like me, it's everywhere. It was everywhere in my life. And I'll tell you what, I hated accountability when I learned about it. The first time I heard about it, I was angry. I wanted to throat punch the person that told me. Like, I wanted to run the other way. And it was because I needed to work on it so badly. So if this really turns you off, then be like, oh, maybe this is something I really get to work on. That's okay. That was where I was. Okay. So the first step in accountability, and if you're calling it personal responsibility, you can do whatever you want. But if I was you guys, I'd write these down. I've had these in my notes on my phone since like for several years. And I go back and I look at them all of the time. My kids can tell you these steps because we've walked through them, and not like you're sitting there like standing over somebody, like coaching them. Like, you walk them through this evolution of growth and looking at themselves and looking at the situation. This happens when your kid comes off the court and they're blaming the referee. Ooh, ever had that? This happens when someone comes off the court and they're blaming their teammate. Okay, how is that different than us blaming? Isn't the ref corporate? Isn't the teammate your upline or your sideline? Like, how is it different? Right? Like, I want you to think about that. How is it different? And we want to say it's different, but it's not different. It's the same thing. Okay. So step one of accountability is accepting the fact that it has nothing to do with the other person or the situation. Now, that morning, y'all, Cash wasn't ready to walk through accountability. Good, Sarah. I love that. Cash wasn't ready to walk through accountability. Not at the very beginning. So I didn't push that because he has to say, he has to own the fact that, like, the milk got spilled, and it's not about Cager. It's not about the flying elbow. It's not about your butt cheeks trying to be warmer than his. It's about the fact that your milk got spilled. Has nothing to do with anybody else. You've lost the ability to blame somebody. And that's why this world, think about the world right now, y'all. Everybody's offended. Everybody's pointing fingers. Everybody's blaming anybody. In case you don't know, go check Twitter. And then after that, go have a detox bath and like listen to some other music or something to like cleanse yourself from spending 20 minutes on there. Like the whole world is offended and the whole world is pointing fingers and the whole world is complaining. And some of these might be valid things, but does that serve you? No, no. They might be valid concerns, but it doesn't serve you. So step one is acknowledging the fact that it has nothing to do with the other person or the situation, period. If you're walking through this with someone, maybe this someone's on your team, maybe this is you, maybe it's a child in your life, maybe it's your best friend, it doesn't matter. If they're not ready to say they're saying it's their fault. Okay, that's really great. You want to talk about something else? You want to go shopping? You want to go get a pedicure? Do you want to like, I don't know, go to the gym? Like we can do anything, but we're not talking about accountability if you're not ready to get past step one. And that sounds so harsh, but it's just true, y'all. This is like pull up your big girl panties and like get to the fact that we're going to look at only our own selves. I'm only going to look at like, this is a movie scene. I have my role. Becky Page has her script. Andrea has hers. Pam has hers. I'm playing my part. Beck's playing her part. Andrea's playing her part. Pam's playing her part. I'm only liable for my own lines. I'm only responsible for the words that I say, the time I step on stage, the steps that I do, the actions that I make, the drama that I create, the messages that I send. I'm only responsible for mine. You're only looking at your own role play here, okay? And we don't get to blame the other parts of the story. That doesn't mean they're not there. You just don't get to blame them, okay? Yes, yes. Becky says, big problem when they are totally out of my control, which is like hashtag everything, right? Like everything in the whole world is almost out of, I mean, literally everything's out of our control, minus what we say and how we show up. So we're looking at how we show up. So we're talking about like, it's only about myself. It's not about the other person or situation. Step two, this is a great one. And I asked Cash this, how did I contribute to, cause, create, or allow this? And I will say it several times, and I hope you memorize it. How did I contribute to, cause, create, or allow this? So Cash would have to openly say, I carried my milk to the fireplace. I blamed Cager. I got mad at Cager when his elbow hit it. Not that Cager's elbow hit it. I got mad at Cager. I contributed to that mess because I got angry. I also brought my milk over there. I brought my milk over there after you said not to bring my milk over there. Like, even if someone else spills your milk, y'all, I'm talking about your plexus business. I'm talking about the people on your team that you can't get along with. I'm talking about the people at Thanksgiving's going to be next month. How's that looking? Like, right? We have people that are like, okay, those people I can't get along with that are in my family. Like, I'm talking about that. Like, even if those people do different things, it doesn't matter. How did you contribute to, cause, create, or allow this? And it might be, I chose to join their team. I chose to message them and they joined my team. I chose to participate in that challenge with them and that opened influence to them with my team. I chose to, join Plexus. I chose to marry my husband and I got this set of in-laws. I chose to sign my kid up for this travel team and it came with these coaches and this experience. Whoa, right? Like I chose this. Like you get to acknowledge your part and it kind of stinks because that takes away our ability to blame, complain, or point fingers at anybody but our own part. Okay. So how did I contribute to, cause, create, or allow this? And your part might be minor. There are people that are victimized every day. Your part might be minor, but you still chose to like maybe leave your house. You still chose to go somewhere and something bad could have happened to you. I'm not negating that at all. I'm just saying we always do have a part, right? We have a part. And it doesn't make you a bad guy. It just makes you honest walking through your accountable story. Okay. Step 3. What is your lesson here? Or what are your lessons? Cash would have told you, should have listened to my mom. Shouldn't have brought my milk to the fireplace. That was his lesson. I also shouldn't have got angry when my brother did something that I couldn't control. Right? I could have controlled that. I shouldn't have blamed my brother for something that I created. And he will tell you guys this. You guys, he's 10. If I can, it may not be right then, but it could be, 2 hours later, and we're going to talk about it. And he will tell you those things. And if a 10-year-old can do it, we can. Here's what is the difference between a 10-year-old and yourself. Pride. A 10-year-old is not worried about saving face. A 10-year-old will be honest about how they screwed up and how they're just selfish. A 10-year-old will be honest about like, I wanted them to be bad and I wanted to be good. They'll just tell you, they'll just own it. And we're like, well, I wanted to be a good leader. And we'll sell all these fancy flowery words. That's what my pastor always says. He's like, all this flowery language to fluff it up a little bit. But the 10-year-old is just going to be brutally honest. Like, be 10, literally be 10 and just own it. Just own it. Okay. And then the last one, my favorite part of this, because it's not about like dragging yourself through the mud saying, I suck. Oh my gosh, I did all these bad things. And now I got to figure out how to fix it. What am I committed to going forward? And again, I'm not talking about spilled milk. I'm using the example of spilled milk, but you're walking through right now. You all have something in your head. You're like, oh, okay, I get to work on my personal responsibility. I get to work on my accountability in that area. Okay, congratulations. We all do. It's okay. It's okay. If you have someone that you cannot stand, my friend, you have some accountability to work on. And it's not that they need to be nicer to you. It's not that they need to respect you more. It's not that they don't need to do anything. It's not about they. It's all this is a first person. This is all about I. What can I do? How am I committed to being different? What am I committed to going forward? Am I committed to listening to my mom and not taking the milk over to the fireplace? Am I committing to not blame my brother when it spills? Am I committing to not get angry over something that was outside of my control and choose to not react? So what are we committed to going forward? For me, this was like, I'm committed. Okay, let's go back to the podcast example, which I wasn't planning on sharing, but I'm committed to being myself. I'm committed to showing up uncensored. There have been times that I've recorded stuff and I'm like, ooh, that was like a line that like, so I could get hate mail for that. And in my mind, I'm like, no, you committed to being authentic and real and uncensored. You're not going to go back and edit that. And if somebody has some criticism, it doesn't mean that you're a bad podcaster or you have a bad message. Maybe that message wasn't for them. So I know what I'm committed to. And that's the biggest thing, y'all. And that doesn't mean I do it perfectly. Heavens no, I screw up every single day. Every single day I screw up and I fall short every single day because my enemy is pride. So, okay, this is what I opened my Bible to. I was like, okay, how should I get ready for this call? And I had a few notes. I wanted to talk about accountability and I wasn't sure what I'm going to talk about. And then I was on a call this morning and someone said, and it blew me away. And I've heard this before, but I heard it fresh this morning. Like sometimes it's like salt in the wound. You hear it fresh, like it's a brand new time. It's like you learned today differently than you learned a year ago. Praise God for that. That fear is pride in disguise. So if I was afraid to come talk to you all this morning, I'm not afraid to talk to you. I'm afraid that you're going to judge me. I'm going to be afraid that you think I don't have the right thing to offer as a podcaster, or a diamond ambassador or whatever. Or I'm afraid that you're going to be, critical of the way that I show up, or that I may not teach you the right thing. It has nothing to do with actual fear. It's my pride. And then I opened my Bible and this is what it said. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility, consider others better than yourselves. Philippians 2:3. Those who are slaves to pride do anything to maintain the illusion that they are more capable, more worthy, and more significant than others. Pride prompts people to do any number of horrible acts to those that they think are lesser beings than themselves. Pride is the original sin. It was Satan's sin in heaven and the sin he promotes among human beings. That was just a paragraph beyond Philippians 2:3. I literally opened my Bible and that's what I read after I heard that this morning. After I was like, and I'll tell you why I sat in my chair to open my Bible. Cause I'm like, okay, like, do I need to write down some more notes? Like, should I be more prepared? And I thought, no, I shouldn't be more prepared. I know what I want to say. I know accountability inside now. I could recite it in my sleep and I'm going to show up in my authentic human self. And if they don't learn anything, it's not on me, y'all. I'm not accountable for what you learned this morning. You have personal responsibility to take something away from this call. Should you choose to allow yourself to learn something? And praise God, I pray that you go teach it to your teams. I pray that you go teach it to your kids. I pray that you teach it to the women you're in women's group with, whoever you encounter, that you help them see past that fear disguised, as that pride disguised as fear and needing to like protect themselves and blame someone else. Like it all goes together. We want to blame someone else. We want to complain about what they're not doing. And we want to point fingers. And the only person that you're responsible for and that you can control is yourself. So I want you to think about, and all the things we've talked about this morning, spilled milk. I want you to think about, when is the last time in your business specifically you have complained about someone spilling your milk? And I know I already asked that. Oh, it applies to everything. It literally applies to everything. And I think, again, it just said, like, It's Satan's original sin, right? It's the sin that he promotes in this world. It's one of the original sins. So why would we not want to disguise it and cover it up and still be walking around in that, right? Like accountability takes away that. And it's pretty vulnerable. It's pretty revealing. Like it's pretty, like you feel a little bit naked when you're walking in accountability and you're owning your part. I promise you, you feel really vulnerable when you're walking like that. And that's okay. Like it's really okay. I tell you what, something I didn't put on my bio is I'm now a school board member in my local town. You want to feel vulnerable? You want to feel exposed? You want to feel like, there's people out there that I never thought I would think this, but I was like, I feel like I should like record every conversation that I have. Or I feel like, I mean, that's a strange place to be, except for it taught me this. God has taught me so much through this journey of the last 11 months. And then since last May, actually. So a year and a half, maybe. That I was like, I should actually be walking around like every conversation is recorded. I should actually be walking around like every conversation is over a loudspeaker. I ought to be sending every email and every text message as if it could be, you could have a Quora request and you could post it on Facebook and it could have my name on it. That's how I should be living. That's accountable living. It's scary. I'm just going to tell you straight up. It's scary. Is that terrifying? Do you have goosebumps a little bit? Like, oh my gosh, they would read what was on my phone. They would hear every voice message. They would. Yeah. And the one that we're accountable to already does, y'all. He already does. So I'm totally getting off on a tangent here a little bit, but I wanted to just encourage you guys this morning to take a look at personal responsibility in your business, because we spend a lot of time pointing fingers at somebody else, and you spend so much time, so much emotional bandwidth, so much energy in blaming someone else rather than sitting down and doing your IPA, rather than sitting down and sending messages, rather than, getting on the call or leading whatever, because we're so busy blaming somebody else that we're not doing our own work. And I've been a victim of that. I have absolutely been a victim of that. In fact, I don't know, I'm not on, there's like 2 screens here. So I don't know if she's on here, but me and my upline, you guys know her, it's Erin Kane. I love her dearly. I say we've been through a plex of, we're like married, we've been separated, thought about divorce, got back together. Like we've had conversations related to accountability and how we're going to show up. And I'm responsible for me and she's responsible for her. Those are some of the most beautiful conversations that we've ever had that I've grown from. And so has she. And I know to this day, I'm responsible for my business. And I did a lot of, and she'll tell you, maybe she wouldn't tell you, she'd probably speak nicer, as she'd save face for me. But I spent a lot of time pointing fingers and blaming her for things that were not her fault, y'all. They weren't her fault. And I don't even like the word fault. I want you to just erase that from your category or from your vocabulary. Just erase it. Don't ever say anything's anybody's fault. You can say, this is the part that I played. This is the part that they played. Unless you are an attorney and you're going to assign guilt. And by the way, I don't think they're ever 100% right. Sorry for anybody who's, married to one of those people or is one of those people. There's no way you can ever be 100% certain that who, like how much like liability lied with this person and how much. No, you can't do that. So fault doesn't serve you. What role did you play? What are you personally responsible for? And I'm going to tell you, when it comes to your business, y'all, you're personally responsible for it all. It's not your upline, your sideline, your downline, your company's job to run the incentive, to run the call, to run the contest, to pony up the money or the prize or whatever that is. It's not. It's nice when they do, but it's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility. And the minute we're all personally responsible for our businesses and then we come together and we work together, man, it's beautiful what we can do together. But we are not going to accomplish anything if we're blaming and we're complaining and we're pointing fingers. And I'm not sure I have anything else for that, Ellen. That might be it. Like I like only had a few notes and then, yeah.
Well, that was like incredible. I wish I could write notes down. I wrote as many notes with my left hand as I possibly could, but
look at her. She did not complain about the fact that she cannot write notes. Look at you.
I need to send y'all a screenshot of the notes I took. It looks like a child, but anyway, that was unbelievably not only timely, but just when you talk about accountability, I think we all, and I've always seen accountability is we think has to do with the other person, like they need to be held accountable. Mm-hmm. But when you tie it to personal responsibility, it's like and I know my husband does a lot of marriage counseling. He's like, I do premarital, postmarital, marital. And he's like, you have to put that hula hoop all the way in on top of you, and you are responsible for what's inside that hula hoop all the time, whether you're involved with something and you want to blame your spouse or you want to blame someone, you're still responsible, like you said, for everything that goes on inside that circle. And I think when you were talking, I was thinking, okay, so let's say that we have a situation like what you're saying, that we're blaming that other person, where it's the upline, sideline, downline, our team's not working, whatever. What are some like action steps? What is a step that we could take today that we could either start repairing that relationship, start, like, hey, I want to move forward from this. I know you were talking about how you and Aaron had some hard conversations. What is something like an action step that we could take today to start working on that personal responsibility and move past that blaming?
I love that because I really do think you can sit on this information, but if a podcast did it or if a book did it, Twitter and Facebook wouldn't look the way they look, y'all. Like, right? We'd all be healthy humans and nobody would be attacking each other. It doesn't work unless you implement things and put them into action. So I love that you asked that. So I would say step one is to take these steps and work through them, like on your own, and be real and be honest about them. Literally be real and be honest. And if your answer is, well, it is the other person, well, then my friends, close your book, pray about it, and come back in a week or come back in a day. You're not ready. And that's okay. Like, you can't force something on someone or on yourself if you're not ready. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys know I have a lot of things in my life that I could tell you that I could have either stopped me. I could have been my victim story. I could have sat there and blamed all the people, or I could, understand, walk in accountability, and use that to propel me forward. I think some of you would be floored of like the way that I was raised or the support system that I currently have sometimes. So if you're not ready to stop blaming people, my friends, you don't have any work to do today, except for to spend time, I would say, in prayer and ask God to soften your heart and open your heart to these ideas. Because I think that if we're calling it what it is, it's pride. It's pride eating you, that you cannot look at your own part. Okay. But I would walk through these really honestly on your own. And if you're doing it, you're going to have a gut ache. Like, you're going to be like, gosh, that sucks. Like, I don't want to think that about myself. Okay. Neither did I. It's really not very fun. And here's the thing, you're gonna be like, I don't want to think that today. And then it's Wednesday. Gosh dang it, I'm doing it again on Wednesday. And it's about that same person. Okay, well, hello, human. So am I. Like, again, we're going to battle this as long as we're here on this planet. Like, you're not going to overcome this entirely. This is a journey that you're on. And you might need some wash, rinse, repeat. I have people, I'm not lying, when like I walk through these all the time and I see them on a regular basis. And these people have absolutely attacked me publicly, verbally, on Facebook and in person. That doesn't mean that I get to say they're horrible to me. And no, I don't. I've said, okay, how did I show up that maybe would have thought that that they would think that I was a bad person? Like, literally, how did I contribute to that? Like, did I ever go to them and talk to them? Now, there may be people in your life that you cannot reconcile with, that maybe you're not going to go along with, you may not have a relationship with. It doesn't mean that you exonerate yourself from your own personal responsibility. It doesn't mean that you ever stop working these steps. So I would say, first and foremost, walk through these steps. That's what I did. And then I called Erin and I had these steps on my paper and I talked to her on speakerphone. She didn't know that I was reading straight from this paper. She does now, because I've told her. I mean, this was years ago. And I said, like, I want to talk to you about like how I've been feeling in our relationship. And I talked to her about, there's something called the clarifying conversations formula that I'd be happy to share with you guys that I coach on. And it's really accountability put in a conversation form. And you walk through this conversation. And part of it is like, this is the way that I've shown up. And it probably made you feel this way. Like, I've had these conversations. And what's really interesting, I've done this several times. I've done it with a friend who absolutely hated, she was so angry with me. But here's what I would do. Give yourself an exit. Like, if you guys haven't read the book Boundaries, my friend wanted to come to my house and she was really mad at me. I was like, nope, I'll go to your house. I'll be there. Like, because guess what? Then when I want to leave, I can leave. Like, I don't know how to kick you out of my living room if you really want to actually like harm me. Like, she was so angry. And we're friends now. we're probably not as close of friends, but that friendship was restored because of that conversation. And you guys, I didn't do anything wrong, but I went over there and I walked through these steps. Not didn't do anything wrong. I don't like right or wrong either. I wasn't, she thought I'd done this really horrible thing. It was totally taken out of context, but I still honored her to let her walk through that. And I still apologized for my part. And you might say, like, I'm not apologizing for anything. If you played a part, you get to, if you really want to reconcile and move forward, you get to be sorry. If you want to, like, it's just, and you know what? My sorry was to Aaron. I'm sorry for all the times I talked behind your back and said that you're a crappy leader. I'm sorry for all the times that I sold you out. But here was my commitment at the bottom of that. And I don't think she'd care that I'm sharing this on here, because I've shared it with her personally. We've shared this at team retreats. At the very bottom, when what I was committed to going forward, I said, I promise I will never sucker you into doing something ever again, because I was a strong personality and I could get her to do anything that I wanted her to do. And I knew it. You know somebody in your life right now that you can do that to. And then they get to doing things that they don't want to do. And then you're mad at them because they don't show up because you had expectations for them. And then, you want to give them a swirly. Like, I've never actually seen that done, but I remember hearing about that when I was in school. So like, then you're mad, right? And that's not fair. And so I said, I promise to never like make excuses or speak on your behalf. And I will never coerce you into doing something that you don't want to do. That was my commitment going forward, because I had done both of those things, which had led to where our relationship was. So I would say walking through these steps and then calling up that person. And it's okay if you have notes and you're on speakerphone, because you're going to have a little bit of a turning stomach. You're going to be sweating a little bit. It's going to be uncomfortable. Personal responsibility really isn't fun. Remember when I told you I wanted to throat punch the person who taught me? Like, I didn't like it. It's not in our human nature to pick this up and run with it and walk this out. It is hard. And I don't even like the word hard, but it requires effort, and it's going to go against however you've been raised. Little kids don't want to take personal responsibility. You know why? Because they're humans. They weren't taught that. They were born like that. So if you were born like that, you get to work on it too. It's okay. Like, we always want to blame everybody. And don't we learn from my kid's favorite, I'm being facetious, but my favorite line is when they're like, they did it. And then it's ... on purpose. Like, don't they always assign like intent? Like, they're just geniuses. They know what was going on in their head before they did it. And then they did it on purpose, as if my kid could throw across the yard and hit you in the middle of the forehead if he tried 100 times in a row, right? Like, he meant to throw it at you. I don't think he meant to hit you square in the forehead, right? Like, but they assign this intention and this like motive behind it, and they don't know. So we do that too. We're kids. They did it, and they did it to me on purpose. You don't know that? Have you asked them? I guarantee your story in your brain is way worse and way different and totally incorrect. Promise you, every time. So I would actually have a conversation with them if they're open to having a conversation. Okay, so do you want me to answer this question in the chat?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? This is just amazing, Brooke, that it's like, this is how you adult and how you become and work on your leadership, is realizing these things. But I think there's a great question from Jennifer. How do you handle situations when that person will not talk to you, or they're not ready to talk to you about the situation?
Okay. And I love that you said that, because really the only reason that I started coaching is because I'm like, y'all, I was raised in a home of 2 recovering addicts. My brothers were drug addicts. My brothers, one of them was in and out of jail before I was out of high school. Neither one of them graduated. Like, I was from a divorced home. Like, I was not raised in a wholesome environment. I was not raised in an uplifting, like, sarcasm and cynicism were like, I spoke them fluently. Like, I was not raised like this. And it was someone else's fault that we were poor. It was someone else's fault that my brother was in trouble. The teachers didn't like him. Like, they're always out to get him. And right now you think someone's out to get you. Like, you may not have the same dramatic story, but you do. And so I was not, I did not know how to adult. I didn't know how to be a wholesome human being. And when I learned, I was like, and it began to make sense for me as a Christ follower, like, oh, this is what they mean with like taking thoughts captive and like walking in without pride. Like, I didn't know. Like, they're like, well, read it. It says it right there. Well, yeah, that's great, but I don't know how to apply that. Like, I didn't know that. And so like, that was, I found a way that worked for me. And I knew if it would work for me, and I wasn't really that smart, I could teach other people the same things I can teach my kids. So how do you handle this when people will not talk to you about whatever's going on? I have people in my life that will not talk to me about what's going on. I have people in my life that do not like me. They do not support me. They've been open about it. Again, one has been open publicly on social media all over. That doesn't change the way that you show up unless you choose to let it. It doesn't change the way that you show up. You still are going to say, okay, what's step one? It's not about the other person or situation. They don't want to talk to me. I want to reconcile, but it's not about them. It's about my journey and what I'm doing. I'm just going to walk through this because this is what I would do. Okay, how did I contribute to create, cause, or allow? Well, I've been a jerk face to them. Well, I talked about it one time bad on social media. Well, this has been a 15-year feud. Well, like the way I've shown up in the past, I wouldn't blame them. They probably don't want to talk to me. Like those might be things that are true. They were true for me in certain situations for sure. Or maybe it's just like, I've created this situation of turmoil where we have not gotten along. And so I've contributed to this. Okay, so what's my lesson? Maybe not everybody wants to reconcile when I want to reconcile. Okay. Or maybe my lesson is like their lack of wanting to reconcile or talk to me doesn't change the way that I get to choose to show up in this world. That would be one of mine. I have people in my life. I have an older brother, you guys, who absolutely can't stand me. In fact, my brother told me at his birthday party, my other brother, who I get along with, said that my brother's going to sue me when my parents die. I was like, for what? Like, A, I hope they don't have anything. And B, like, what? I was like, the brother I don't talk to. So I'm just prepping myself for a lawsuit. Just kidding. I'm going to get but like, seriously, you guys, like people are out there and so this brother is not somebody that I probably am going to like see reconciliation with. But here's what I'm committed to. Every time I see him, I go up and give him a hug and I talk to him as if he's never hurt me, as if he's never caused harm. Like he's said and done horrible things to me. But that doesn't need to change the way that I show up. Now I just made that sound really pretty, tied up with the bow in about 13 seconds. And that's been like, we entered a huge dark cloud when my oldest son was born. This is a 17-year wound that probably was on before that. This is not, but when you do this this is a daily commitment. So you may have someone right now you're going to work through this with, and they don't want to talk to you. Okay, it's Monday. So you're going to do it again on Wednesday, and you're going to do it again on Friday. And 10 years from now, you might not want to like strangle them when they walk in the room. Your stomach may not turn when they walk in the room. And there's no scientific like number that says this is it, but the time's going to pass anyway. Aren't you worth the work? And like, isn't your peace of mind worth the work? Like no one said this is to make someone else feel better. This is to give you peace of mind, my friends, you. So yeah, not everybody wants to be your friend. That is a lesson that I've learned. And that's okay. And not everybody wants to reconcile with you. And that's also okay. That's okay.
That's a great, Brooke, that's a great way to look at it, because I think maybe we feel like, oh, I'm off the hook. They don't want to do it. So I can just drop it. And then we can still have that harboring feeling of blame or whatever. Mm-hmm. But when you're like, okay, you got to do this. This is a daily pick up your cross and do the things. Because eventually, like you said, it might be something that kind of releases you, that you are doing your part. You're managing your circle and they're just not ready. But I love that. Andrea, Becky, do y'all have any other comments or questions or anything before and Brooke, do you mind putting in, before I kick it over to them, the steps, the 3 steps in the comment section of the post on the table, just so okay.
Yeah. You mean the accountability steps? Yeah.
The accountability steps.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I mean, my advice to you guys is memorize them and live by them. Like it will change your life. You're going to hate it. You're going to claw and fight like a little kid being shoved in the back seat, going to get vaccinations. Like, I'm not joking. Like you're going to hate it. Or like your animal going to the vet. Like, how do they know that one time you're going in the car to the vet? They just do, right? Like you're going to hate it. And if you hate it, you need it that much more. Like if you're resisting it, you need it that much more. I promise you.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things about all of this is that you're healing your own bitterness and you're actually allowing it not to fester in your own self. Like so much of what you've talked about being personally responsible actually allows you, when Ellen's talking about that hula hoop, I think, what is that, regen or re-engage that we talk about with that hula hoop, is that, which is funny because Becky helped write so much of that curriculum, is we're talking about like not allowing the bitterness in and not allowing it to fester. Like even when you're talking about the relationship with your brother, If we talk about uplines and downlines and the fact that some of us have been in here 9 years, I think Brooke, you said 7 years, like, and some of us want to be here for the next 10, 20 years, right? We want this to be something that is our long-term careers. And you have to work on not allowing that bitterness to seep in and then, continue to grow. Because if these things aren't resolved, if these conversations aren't had, if you don't say, oh, it hurt my feelings when you messaged me that, or you don't realize you have expectations of your downline that they're going to add their 3, add their 3, add their 3 so that you can go, Ruby this month. If you don't work on all of those thoughts, then that bitterness gets in there. And then 3 years from now, 6 years from now, 9 years from now, it just grows. And then every conversation that you have with that person, every interaction is just layered with a conversation they didn't even realize you had 3 years ago that hurt your feelings or hurt their feelings. And now all of a sudden you've got all of this and you almost can't backtrack and say, well, that one time you said this, it hurt my feelings. And you've just let everything else add on top of it. So I just think there's so much wisdom in, as we can see, the greatest thing about this call is the fact that we can see it in our businesses, but that we can see it with our kids, because I'm pretty sure that your 2 younger ones mirror my 12-year-old like nobody's business. It's a conversation we have every single day. Yes, but what's your responsibility here? Yes, do not tell me what William did or what the girls in class did or I don't want to hear how the teacher treats the girls. Did you talk in class? Yes, therefore you're responsible and you get in trouble. But it's not fair. Yes, I realize you don't think it's fair. And so it's great to be able to have these conversations with our children, with our spouses, with our siblings, as mine's on the call, with our teams. And then for so many of y'all that are teachers and are in corporate America and still working with other people going, oh, I see how this applies. And so, Brooke, I just want to thank you for bringing something that's so crucial to our businesses and so crucial to something we can do every single day is literally sit down and go, okay, here are my 4 questions. Where do I kind of need to work on this? And that's a great thing to just journal every day. Like, is there somewhere in my business that I am blaming someone? Is there somewhere in here that I need to accept some responsibility? And then what do I actually need to do about it? What is my personal action item going forward? What a great way to really start your business on those days when you're doing, your 5 days a week that you're working this and doing your IPA. Starting with your 4 questions is a great way to just get started. So I really appreciate that. Anything that I missed before we get off the call? Anybody?
I just have one thought, and it's because this whole conversation like lights my fire. But tell us in the chat section, do you find that you're drawn to people like Brooke, who is what the 12-step recovery world would call rigorous honesty? Like, she's rigorously honest with herself and honest with you. Tell me in the chat if you find that, if it draws you in. I personally am so, she scares me. I'm so drawn to these personalities because I know there's personal safety. I know if I hurt Brooke or anger her or create that, she's going to tell me. And to me, that creates relational equity. It's like, she's safe enough for me to screw up with. She's safe enough for me to be offensive. She's not going to turn and like go off on me. So, okay. I love saying this. I love this kick your butt honesty. And the reason it's so attractive is because she started with herself. And Brooke, I was so curious when you were working on all of this, and I know it takes a season, right? This is not a once and done. This, like you said, it's a daily practice. Maybe in 10 years, you see the fruit. What was your business like before you started? Like, was your business flourishing? Was it stalled? Did you ever reach a place where you're like, I'm stuck and it's because of this emotional stuff?
Oh yeah. So the biggest thing about when I started just working on, I knew I needed to work on myself. I was like, things are going well, but I just felt just this ick inside of me. And my business I would say the numbers would have looked okay. From the outside, it would have looked okay, but I was overwhelmed. It was like, I was always running late. I was always procrastinating. I was always disorganized. My thoughts were horrible about all the things. Like, it felt so hard. It felt like I was in quicksand all of the time. Even though I was accomplishing things and numbers looked good, nothing was easy. Nothing at all was easy. And then there was so much turmoil when you're up against different people, because you're taking everything personally. Everybody's personally attacking you, right? They're all letting you down. It's all their fault. Like, and it's all, and that was when you were talking about Andrea. I would say the one question, if you're ever gonna ask yourself just one question, I say like, what can I, like, whatever your problem is, that problem floating around there or blaming, like, what can I do about this? Because we always want to say, what, it's your fault, right? Like, well, if Becky would just recruit, if my downline would just recruit, if my people would just get on calls, what can I do about this? Like, maybe I could do something different. Maybe I just show up different to get them on calls, right? But yeah, no, my business was, by everybody from the outside looking in, it would have been like the Plexus dream, and I was miserable.
Yeah.
And now it feels amazing. It just feels beautiful, and I'm meant to be here, and it's with ease. That doesn't mean I don't put in work, and I don't sit there like, oh my gosh, I'm going to see that girl at football, and I just messaged her this morning, and oh my gosh, yeah, okay, I'm human. I have thoughts, but I show up and do it. And I don't know. I'm not going to second guess all day long whether I should have messaged her or not, like I would have before. Tons of second guessing, massively insecure.
But I love it. And I love that you mentioned your family dynamic. Your family of origin was like an addicted family system, where there's a lot of shame. And my one thought when you were sharing was that some of us are sitting so much in a place of shame that personal accountability feels like a threat, but it's actually like the door to freedom. It's what relieves shame. And so many of us are stuck in a shame cycle around our businesses. There's this idea of like, I can't. And that creates this desire, like we want compassion, but we're attempting to get it through victimhood, which just doesn't work. There's no bridge there. Those two things are like two separate cliffs. And I love the fact that personal responsibility, accountability is really the bridge to self-compassion and growth. That was one thing that stuck out to me, was like, oh, you had this aha, like this, it was like the Lord gave you a sense about all this dis-ease happening in your space. And he gave you the out, which was like, what's my part? I want to repent, confess, forgive, and grow. And I like, that's the number one gift I wish people would get from Plexus, because it's a gift that it's eternal, right? Like,
yeah,
do this work. It's hard, but we're doing like really heavy eternal work that just happens to also give back to the rest of your life, which includes your business.
Yeah. And on that note, I didn't say this, but you guys probably got the idea. I loved being the victim. I mean, when we blame and complain, we love being the victim. Like, and if you don't know what you complain about over and over, it might not be a good time right now to text your friends that are on this call, but text your friends that are on this call. Like, if you've said it 100 times, like, they know where you're playing victim, right? They know where you're blaming somebody else. And it's just the truth, like that story that you tell over and over and over. And I got to the point, like, even now, I'm like, if I hear myself saying, like, I don't get disgusted like I used to, because there used to be a layer of just disgust and shame that I'd be so frustrated with myself. But I'll be like, I don't do that. Brooke, what are you doing? Why are you telling somebody else? Like, that's not how you grow. That's not what you do. But I wanted so much attention and like that badge of like, oh, it's so hard for me. It is so hard for me. I just loved it. It was my favorite. And that has not, like, the person wearing that is not one, like, there's not, your pinky toe is not personally responsible, my friends. It's just not. And I love you enough to tell you that. And humans, you guys, don't feel like a bad person. You are born like this. You're born like this. You are born and you do not want to accept personal responsibility. Go to a playground with kids. It's always someone else's fault. It's always the teacher's fault. My kid, they lost in a tie, 2 undefeated teams, this 10-year-old accepting personal responsibility. And he caught the touchdown pass in overtime to tie it back up. And you guys, he missed the extra point catch. Like, it was flying through the air off his fingertips. It's so dramatic. And he sits on the ground like this. It's epic. It's cash, because he's so charismatic and funny. I think he's going to be a preacher someday. That's what I'm like speaking that into existence. Sits on the ground with his hands up like this. And he thought it was pass interference. No, it wasn't pass interference, but you couldn't have told him any different. Like, he knew it was that guy's fault, and that ref didn't throw that flag. No, it wasn't pass interference, but he wanted it to be someone else's fault. Just so happens that it ended in a tie. I was like, that's really okay. And he watched that back later and he understood it, but man, he was really angry for a while and he wanted to blame the referee. Okay, well, who are you blaming? Who's your referee? Literally. Like, who are you blaming? Absolutely, Tina. You can only control yourself. We cannot control other people. And That is the toughest thing to learn. And I think if you're in Plexus and you've seen any level of success, you're probably a bit of a control freak. Just saying. I'll say that too. I don't think I'm hurting anybody's feelings. I think you're all like, yeah. So.
Well, Brooke, this was incredible. And I know people are wanting to get the recording of this, which I will post later. But I mean, phenomenal job of just communicating what was on your heart, what God gave you to tell us today. And it was super convicting for me. And I'm going to put these steps in place and I'm going to try to work this. I thought when you were speaking, as far as like IPA, this is going to be a part of my IPA. Like we're doing IPA, but these steps are going to be part of that, because I think this is a huge part of how we're going to grow as leaders, or how we're not going to grow as leaders if we stay in the mindset of victimhood and blaming and not take personal responsibility. So thank you so much for giving us the time and sharing, girl. It was amazing. And we will have to have you come back, girl, because I feel like I got some free therapy.
Well, I love it. I could literally talk about this all day, every day. And that's one of the reasons I started to share. Cause I'm like, you guys, here's the thing. My own parents don't practice this. Like you can walk it, you can breathe it, you can be it, you can model it. And the people around you don't have to pick up on it, but it doesn't have to make you less passionate. So just own it, walk it out. And I love that they would make that part of your IPA. Like, yeah, like scripture, that was Philippians 2:3 that I shared with you guys. That doesn't have to be yours, but that's a really good one that talks about, we're not doing things out of selfish ambition, but considering others better than ourselves. If you're walking in accountability, you're considering others because you're not blaming them. You're considering your role, you're considering their role. So thanks for having me, guys. Seriously.
Thanks, Brooke. I'll see y'all later.